Good evening. Welcome to tonight's event, Ealing's Postwar London. It always rains on Sunday to the Ladykillers. My name's Nikki. I work for Westminster Libraries. My colleague Lola is assisting me in the background. She also works for Westminster. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Jenny Stewart to talk to us about the locations for Ealing's post-war films. Some of you may have heard Jenny's previous talk, which was on earlier Ealing films. If you didn't, don't worry, because we're going to send out the link to the YouTube recording of it after the event. Please don't go and start looking for it now, though. Okay, welcome to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Nikki. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Some of you may have come to the previous talk that I did on Hue and Cry, Passport to Pimlico, and the Blue Lamp. And in that talk, I gave a bit of context about post-war London, what it was like, and Ealing Studios. I'm not going to do that today, but if you missed the first talk and you do want all that kind of contextual stuff, the talk is on YouTube, and I'm sure Nikki can send out the link so that you can access that afterwards.
Yes, everybody who booked through Eventbrite will get sent both a recording to this event and a recording to the past one.
Yay, nice one. Thank you. Okay, so in the first talk, we looked at the ways in which Ealing portrayed London, and particularly made use of London immediately after the war, so kind of bomb-scarred London, and how that kind of unique environment inspired writers at Ealing to create kind of narratives that made use of that kind of post-war London landscape. So today I'm going to look at 3 of these films, and you can see the ones that I've got highlighted there. So we're going to look at It Always Rains on Sunday, Pool of London, and then the Ladykillers. So that will be our kind of focus for this session. And like I say, if you missed the last one and you want to hear about Hue and Cry, Blue Lamp, and Passport to Pimlico, that's in that talk. So you should have 6 films in total. But I think what you'll find is over the 2 talks is you'll see the kind of similarities between the films, the commonalities in the ways in which Ealing used the post-war London landscape. Okay. So we're going to start off focusing on, because we looked a lot at areas of West London in the last talk, and I want to start off thinking about Ealing's East London. And of course, It Always Rains on Sunday is set in Bethnal Green, and then Pool of London around the kind of Docklands, and of course the Pool area. And this really continues the tradition from Ealing's wartime outputs, with films like The Bells Go Down. If any of you have seen that, there's some great kind of footage. I mean, you can even see in the poster there, St. Paul's. So during World War II, then we have this kind of documentary ethos coming through with Ealing filmmakers making these kind of docudramas, and I really think that really comes through in their kind of post-war films, even their comedies as well as their dramas as well. And of course, the period immediately after the war, there's austerity, you've got the black market. So it lends itself to kind of stories of kind of like underworld type stories, crime, spivs, slums, etc. So we'll start off by looking at It Always Rains on Sunday, which some of you may know. It is quite easy to get hold of. I think it's available on DVD and things like that. And it's a film, I think, that has become more appreciated as the years gone on. I know it was screened at the Bologna Film Festival. BFI did a retrospective and screened it, as you can see with the poster there. So I think it's a film that's becoming more kind of well known as well, because we tend to associate Ealing mainly with the comedies, but there was this other side to Ealing as well. For those of you that don't know the film or want a little recap, of course it takes place on a Sunday, a rainy Sunday in March, where Rosie Sandygate, played by Googie Withers, hides her former lover, who is an escaped convict, or Tommy Swan in a marital home in a terrace in Bethnal Green. There's a number of subplots in the film, and you get to see kind of the idea of the sort of local characters, some of the black market trading that went on there. There's 3 crooks in there that sell stolen goods to a local businessman. And the film is an adaptation of Arthur Leburne's successful 1945 novel of the same name. But it's interesting that the novel was actually set in, I think, it was set in 1939, although the novel was released in 1945. And it's interesting that Ealing actually set it in the present day rather than on the cusp of the Second World War. And this is partly due, as we'll see, to kind of practical considerations. Because the area was bomb scarred, it made sense to give it a more kind of, contemporary setting. So it helped with location shooting. And also that downbeat mood, that immediate post-war austerity, the spivs that I've mentioned, the slum housing that hadn't yet been cleared away, all kind of lent itself well to the demands of the narrative. So it made sense to set it in the kind of contemporary period. Okay, let's have a look at a trailer, just to those of you that haven't seen it, or a recap for those that have. And think about, when you're watching the trailer, just how they're using location as a selling point for the film.
Rains on Sunday in this familiar London street, whose tranquility is suddenly destroyed when a desperate man gambles his life on a woman's memories of a love that might have been.
You could go upstairs to the bedroom. Hmm? It's the safest place. You keep the...
What can you think of no one back?
Hide. What time is it?
2, 3. Who cares?
Who cares? I got a key.
You got everything.
I knew this! You're very excited. You bottom fat cow. Did you call me?
There's such a thing as a law of libel. Such a thing as ham, too. But not in this sandwich.
Now. They're onto me now. You've got to tell them you made me hide. I won't. You've got to tell them.
Come on, car. This is it.
Oh, high drama going on in Ace. It's got it all in terms of genre there: romance, crime, drama. It's quite noir-like in places as well. And it may remind you a bit, it certainly reminds me of, like, it's like a prototype for EastEnders. That sense of that kind of high drama in this sort of in this little community in the East End. And you can see how the idea of location was a selling point. They called it a symphony of the East End. On the poster here, you've got the secrets of a street you know. So it's trying to link it with that kind of sense of familiarity and ordinariness that you get in Ealing films. So it's like ordinary characters in kind of extraordinary situations. And the publicity department really played up this idea that the film was really authentic and shot in the real East End. And a lot of reviewers at the time, and a lot of the press, really praised what they called, the Daily Herald talked about praising the genuine outdoor scenes of Hackney, Bethnal Green and Docklands. However, the main street where Rosie Sandygate lives, and the houses around there were all actually shot in Camden, not Bethnal Green. So it kind of fooled the critics in a way, who assumed that it was genuinely shot in East End when it wasn't. So the art director did go to the East End looking for a relevant, a suitable kind of street. But they eventually chose Clarence Way in Camden, which is the substitute for Coronet Grove, the fictional Coronet Grove, Bethnal Green in the film. Partly because it met the demands of the narrative, and it has that sense of that kind of community, the back-to-back terrace housing, the iron bridge at the end, and the church. And the church is a kind of key point in the film where Tommy Swan hides out, and it's also it's taken directly from the book as well, so it's called Saint Saviour's Church, I think, in the book. So it kind of met the demands of the narrative and had that look of the East End, even though it actually wasn't. So it's quite interesting. And there's another street where another character lives, which I think is Hawley Way. So it's all the streets that compensated for Bethnal Green were all in that kind of grid of streets in Camden around Clarence Way. Okay, and it's quite interesting just to compare the Ealing's depiction of the East End with kind of contemporary descriptions of it. So I found this a walk through the East End, so a contemporary description by G.W. Stonier in 1949, and you can see the description of it, without decoration, brick rows, a railway at the end of the street, houses are too small, and you can see how Clarence Way certainly, evokes that and why it was chosen. And what's interesting is normally we think about Ealing films as portraying this sense of community and kind of nation building. And I think that's undercut quite a bit in this film. And there's a scene where Rosie Sandygate, she reminisces about, there's a flashback to her in the countryside with her lover, Tommy. And she's lying there and says, I wish there were no such place as Bethnal Green. So Bethnal Green isn't seen as this lovely, harmonious community. Often the neighbours are nosy, there's no privacy. It's a place to escape from rather than a place to kind of come to. That's how it's sort of seen in the film. And film historian Christine Geraghty, who's talked a bit about this film, says that the fact that Rosie's often stuck in her home as well, and she lacks community support and is isolated from the community, is backed up by the film's kind of general refusal to offer that cosy view of community with which Ealing is associated. And indeed, the film was written and directed by Robert Hamer, and he's known for being the kind of, I think historian Robert Murphy calls him the kind of outsider at Ealing, that he often portrayed a much darker sort of Ealing and undercut that idea of the kind of cosy Britain, which is certainly true for this film. Okay. In my thesis, I tended to look a lot at comparisons of these Ealing films with documentary footage, photojournalism, and photography as well. And I just wanted to show you some of the images of Nigel Henderson's evocation of the East End in his photography, and how there's this sense of a kind of almost nostalgia for an East End that is about to disappear, and almost a kind of romanticizing of East End working class life. And you can see the way that he even describes the East End, that there's something romantic about its kind of shabbiness, you know, and I mean, his photographs are fantastic, but he's very much an upper middle class artist and photographer looking in, and became fascinated by kind of working class life. And his work, I think, reflects the wider context of artists and sociologists who were sort of mapping the slum terrace on the cusp of demolition at a time when a lot of residents were starting to be rehomed in the kind of new build estates. So there's this sense of a sort of capturing the East End that's about to be lost. And we'll see how that certainly comes through when we look at Pool of London as well. So I think It Always Rains on Sunday sort of sits in between the kind of realities of the East End as being quite, you hear about it being, particularly in a lot of documentary footage, like films like Housing Problems, the poverty that some people lived in, and underplays any kind of sense of romanticism about it. But certainly doesn't. I don't think the film does romanticize it. It kind of sits in the middle, I think, to make it obviously palatable for a mainstream audience, and the fact that there's a sense of familiarity, the street, so making the characters quite relatable. So as well as depicting the fake Bethnal Green, you've also got depictions of Petticoat Lane and the markets. I'm just going to play, while I talk about this, if you've got something to look at, some pathé footage of Petticoat Lane from 1949, so just a couple of years or a year or two after It Always Rains on Sunday. So hopefully there we go, that'll play. It's really difficult to get good clips of this film to show you, get the clips of It Always Rains on Sunday. So unfortunately, all you could see of Petticoat Lane was that image from the trailer. So what happened was they actually did do some shooting on Petticoat Lane, and you see that in the sort of long shots. And the long shots really are quite similar to photojournalism and the sort of documentary footage, newsreel footage that you get at Petticoat Lane from this period. And it also, I think the film does show the kind of eclectic nature of the East End as well. There's a lot of Jewish characters in the film. When you see shots of Petticoat Lane, you see Jewish, Asian, Black people there. So this sense of it being this kind of, multi-ethnic place. And of course, historically, the East End is an arrival point for immigration and for immigrants, and of course Bethnal Green is close to the docks as well. So it has this reputation at the time as being the kind of grey area with all the slums, but also this really vibrant, lively area, and which you see with the scenes of Petticoat Lane. So it kind of coming to life in places on a Sunday. And even one of the characters in the film, Lou, his sister Bessie moans that the East End smells, and Lou says, "Yes, it smells. The markets, the fish shops, the pubs, the clubs." The sense that this is the kind of the liveliness of the East End is evoked there. Some of the shots, of course, away from the long shots, were actually done in the studio at Ealing, because it's much easier to control the filming indoors. But they actually got real traders from Petticoat Lane, and they actually bought their own goods in as well. So it gave the scenes that sort of authenticity. So when you watch the film, kind of look out for that those weren't actors. the market traders. They were actual market traders from Petticoat Lane. Okay. And then the film, and you probably got the sense of this from the trailer, also has this kind of noir quality. And it has been, some critics do consider it to be a film noir. And that really comes to the fore in the final sequence of the film, the real climactic moments, where Tommy Swan dramatically escapes across the ruins of Heartland Road and then through a railway yard. This is the only bit of footage I could find on YouTube to show you. And you can see that whoever's put the footage up has said that you can see the Kingsbridge and the Eastern Hotel in this footage, and those of you that are more familiar with London might know where those are. So I'll just play you a little bit of this just so you can see some of the location work.
Tommy Swan.
I need dough. Lots of dough. How much you collect?
Well, here's a 20 for you, Tom.
Thanks. That's big here, chum.
Oh.
Have you seen Whitey Williams? I want you. Hold him.
I never did it. Recognises that it's Tommy Swan. I wouldn't do the old boy off.
I suppose he gave you the watch and chain as a consolation prize. Come off it, Whitey. Whistle up another man. Get a doctor to examine the body. Photographer, all the usual. Take Williams to the station.
Okay. But you can see that sort of very noir expressionist style, really making use of that sort of post-war landscape, the great use of the steam train with the smoke, and of course the Ladykillers makes great use of that as well, doesn't it, in their kind of climactic scenes. The scenes you see later on, there's a big scene in a railway tunnel as well that was shot at oh, where was it? Let me find. Oh yeah, Temple Mills in Leighton, apparently, because it was big enough for kind of what they wanted to use there. But you do see that quite a lot in these Ealing films, that there is this kind of noir style in quite a few of them, particularly their dramas, and we'll compare this next to similar sequences in Pool of London as well. Okay. So what did the critics make of the film? Quite interesting critical responses to this film. First of all, I just want to just say about what the critics thought about the characters' accents, which you heard in some of the clips. And that really divided critics. So the Tribune thanked the filmmakers for toning down the accents so that audiences outside of London could understand the film. However, Reg Whiteley at the Daily Mirror thought that the actions should have been toned down more, that it was authentic, but perhaps a bit too authentic, that audiences might not understand them. While the cinema said the down-to-earth dialogue is frequently amusing. There you go. It was the actual, the lines that the characters speak was certainly toned down from the novel in terms of what they actually said, for obvious censorship reasons. So Essex Newsman noted, while the film was in production in March of 1947, that the novel was littered with expletives and colourful Anglo-Yiddish of the East End. Somebody, no doubt, has been busy with the bucket and suds. Critics really did praise the authenticity of what they thought was an authentic portrayal of the East End. Spectator said it could even be recommended as a documentary. Dilys Powell in the Sunday Times noted that you know, the fiction film is clearly learning from documentary, and particularly with its use of real London streets. And the provincial newspapers outside of London were keen to stress the realism of the film. And you keep hearing this, a typical evocation of the East End, accurate, realistic, are some of the descriptions that you keep seeing over and over in the contemporary reviews of the film. Although not everyone found it realistic. Some I think there's a couple of critics I thought that seemed to think that it was stereotyping the East End, that it portrayed an East End of spivs, good time girls and bad boys, and saying, well, not everyone in the East End is like that. That's just a kind of minority of people that live there. But that was a minority of reviews. Overall, it was very positive about what they saw as authentic. Okay, so we'll move on next to our next film, Pool of London, released in 1951, about two sailors, Johnny, played by Earl Cameron, and Dan, who arrive in the London docks for a weekend whilst they're ashore, and they end up caught in a smuggling racket. And this film is really playing on the reputation that London Docklands had in the immediate post-war period for smuggling and crime, as the black market flourished in the period, of course, of rationing and austerity. So smuggling nylons from ships arriving into London was actually a common occurrence. And even Earl Cameron himself, because he was in the merchant navy, recalled his own experiences of encountering smuggling, and thought that the film was quite authentic in that sense. I've heard it described, the film, as nautical noir, which I think is a fantastic description of the film, which kind of nicely sums it up. It was a kind of modest success for Ealing. Again, it's a film, I think, that its reputation has certainly grown over time, and I think as well because it's had screenings in the last few years at the BFI. I think more people again are aware of just how good this film is and how interesting it is for not only its representations but also its portrayal of London. Some fantastic location work in this film. The film unit actually they set up an old warehouse in Bermondsey to facilitate the location shooting. So if the weather was bad, they could go and shoot indoors. And they actually used a real steamship, the MS Czech, while she was docked. And the ship in the film is called the Dunbar, and you'll see clips of that soon. So they had to limit shooting to a few days at a time because the ship ran a fortnightly service from London to Poland. You can see there the importance of location in the poster, and we'll see that in the trailer as well. And critics really saw this film as a successor to The Blue Lamp. It's Ealing kind of capitalising on that success with its use of real London locations. Dilys Powell compared it to The Blue Lamp, and others did it as well. And Ealing even did that as well with some of the publicity, they said, from the team that gave you the blue lamp. Okay, I'm going to show you that again, there's not many good clips on YouTube, unfortunately, of this film. And you'll notice the clips here don't really show Earl Cameron. So there's a sense of whitewashing going on, to be aware of that. But you do see some good location work. But we will see some of Earl Cameron soon. So.
Ahoy there! What ship are you? The Dunbar, out of Rotterdam, bound for the pool. Thank you, Captain. You may proceed to your berth.
Wages of sin.
Been working overtime?
Want your milk, eh? Come on.
All set?
Station officer? What's wrong? Bottle of milk? What about it?
He's usually taking it in by this time. All right, I'll go back.
You just put the camera on. So you probably lots of sort of recognizable locations there for you. Some nice nice footage there of St. Paul's as well, which we will come back to. So I just wanted to show a little bit of an interview with Earl Cameron that Earl Cameron did for Channel 4 News, and you do see some little clips of him in this film. So I just want to show that before we talk about his character.
I was in a terrible show called 13 Death Street, Harlem, which I hated. And then this film came along. A man named Basil Dearden was about to make a film, Pool in London. He said, okay, Earl, it's a quiet night, it's in London Bridge, let's try the shot, action. I said, yes, something like that happened. Earl, the camera's right here. So I said, yeah, something like this happened the first time I met Danny. He got in a fight because of me. He said, Earl, you got it, that's it.
Oh, that's where the colored boy comes in. If you ask me, they're both in it together.
Come on, let's walk up to the observatory. We've just got time.
And to play the part that you played and to be in a relationship with a white British woman, that was a big deal at the time, wasn't it? Because, I mean, we're talking about the early 50s.
To me, it was just a natural thing. I mean, she was a girl and I was a man and so on. But, I mean, I did understand, naturally, I'm not stupid. I understood that I'm living in a part of the world where that type of thing, to some degree, is taboo.
When you're at the wheel of a ship at night, far out at sea and nothing else to do, you think about a lot of things you don't understand. You wonder why one man's born white and another isn't. And how about God himself? What color's he? And the stars seem so close, and the world so small in comparison with all the other worlds above you. It doesn't seem to matter so much how we were born.
It doesn't matter.
It does, you know.
And were you ever tempted to go and work as an actor in America at the time? Go to the United States?
Okay, I'll stop that there. So yeah, so again, you can see some nice footage there.
I was in a...
Oh, yeah, it's quite interesting in that his arrival from the SS Dunbar into London invites kind of obvious comparisons really with Windrush. The Pool of London does allude to some racial tension. He does experience some racism, although it's not it's not played up too much in the film. When he gets off the boat, a doorman tells him to hop it. Dan's girlfriend in the film refers to him as dirty, for instance. But it is quite a kind of groundbreaking role, and according to BFI Screen Online, it's the first British film to have a kind of interracial relationship, and it's not made a kind of issue of, although they never really you don't see any kind of physical intimacy between them. So while he may not be an immigrant, he's a kind of sailor who's just docked in London for a while. His status as a young black male arriving into London kind of reflects that immigrant experience as he experiences London. And he has Pat as his guide, who you see there in the photo. And they go around a lot of tourist locations together. So you see some great kind of touristy footage of London, if you like, and it really allows, you know, the filmmakers to really show off the beauty of London, even though it's kind of scarred by the Blitz. You know, it's retained its kind of its beauty throughout the film. And even throughout, I mean, I read the shooting script of the film when I was doing my research on it, and the loving kind of descriptions of London, quite detailed in the script of what it looked like. So just one example here, about how photogenic they saw the city in the shooting script. A long shot over the distant buildings rising amidst the bomb-shattered, weed-grown wastes. From this high vantage point, unsuspecting acres of clear rubble can be seen, leaving the standing buildings like a few sound teeth in the rotting decay. And there's loads of these sort of poetic descriptions of the location in the shooting script. You can see there they go to Greenwich Observatory, so that kind of those sort of nautical themes and references about London's nautical past as well, really showing off the kind of the architecture of the place in those particular scenes. So you see this kind of almost distanced sort of postcard London in the scenes with Pat and Johnny experiencing the city. But like I say, they never really extend beyond tourist sites. You know, that their relationship is only in these sorts of tourist spaces. And of course, you saw in the footage St. Paul's. And we talked about, particularly in the last talk, about the importance of St. Paul's as an icon of kind of London's resilience and victory and beauty at this particular time, mainly because of how the building survived, while all around was rubble. But also because of Herbert Manson's iconic photo that you can see there on the left, that was on the cover of the Daily Mail, which sort of showed London as this kind, St. Paul's as this sort of, as this kind of beacon icon, as a sense of victory and survival as well. And you see lots of St. Paul's in Pool of London as well. And I've just taken a still there. And you also see, and this kind of reminds me a bit of the Blue Lamp in some ways, this idea of Ealing's endeavour to use real spaces like real pubs, theatres that existed at that time that no longer exist today, and how the films, take on, I think they're kind of like historical documents in that, evoking memories of buildings that no longer exist. So Johnny and Dan drink in a pub called the Duke of Clarence that was on the corner of Tooley Street and Battlebridge Lane, which is now demolished, frequented by sailors. So of course the interior work would have been done in the studio, but the exterior work was of the actual pub. And there's also scenes shot in Queen's Theatre in Poplar, which was used as a cinema and a live theatre, and is located on was located on Poplar High Street, and it had this very kind of unique, ornate European style, which really attracted the filmmakers for its kind of photogenic qualities. So again, like other Ealing films of this period, it kind of captures this sort of disappearing London. And there's even this sense in Pool of London of a nostalgia for a changing London, for a London that is going through a period of change. So there's a scene where Johnny and Pat say goodbye, and they lament the imminent disappearance of London's trams. So Pat remarks, "There won't be any trams soon, they're scrapping them all," in a reference to the planned phasing out of the trams between 1950 and 1952. And then It Always Rains on Sunday, you have these wonderful kind of expressionist kind of noir sequences during the climactic scenes at the end of the film, and I've just got a few kind of screenshots there for you to look at. So there's a chase through the Rotherhithe tunnel, which again was all shot on location, very similar in style to a lot of the American noirs of the period, like particularly Jules Dassin's films, The Naked City and Night and the City. Indeed, one of Ealing's taglines for this film was the British Naked City. So this sense of the crime narrative, the noir style, which is slightly different to the sort of touristy daylight sequences that we get when Johnny experiences the city as a kind of an outsider, if you like, looking in on postcard London, and then you get this kind of dark, kind of seedy sort of London as well. And you even have that in one of the characters, Captain Trotter in the film, says to Johnny, and when he describes London, he says, "From afar it gleams like a jewel, but walk within the shadow of its walls, and what do you find? Filth, squalor, misery." And I think that nicely actually sums up how the film is shot and that evocation of London that you have in this particular film. And also, like It Always Rains on Sunday, a lot of the film is actually set on a Sunday as well. And there's some nice evening sequences that are set on a Sunday evening. And even critics sort of noted that the Ealing were very good at kind of showing you a Sunday, the quiet Sunday that's disrupted in these particular films. Okay. So I think that, there are some interesting comparisons. I think both films depict the East End in that kind of immediate, austere post-war period. both were deemed authentic and realistic, both have that kind of noir kind of look particularly in the final climactic sequences. They both have sequences, both evoke a Sunday in London at this time, and both have that kind of extensive location shooting, which is quite interesting. Okay, let's move on to our third and final film, which I'm sure most of you will know well. So we're again, it's a comedy. It has that kind of darkness that we've seen in other Ealing films. It's a kind of macabre sort of black comedy, and this is really Ealing's kind of last big success. Really, this is towards the tail end of Ealing, when it was on a period of financial decline. So it's produced during the summer of 1955, and it was one of 8 comedy films that were produced in Ealing that year, and sort of shows England on the cusp of change, and a lot of critics have read it as Mrs. Wilberforce reflecting this kind of bygone era, and the criminals coming in and reflecting a kind of new era, and that sort of clash between the two there. Although critics at the time didn't read it in that way, I think perhaps having that historical distance, we can see it in that light. The critics at the time were actually more interested in the actors' performances, particularly Katie Johnson as Mrs. Wilberforce. They tended to focus on how good she is in the film. So let's just watch a trailer and remind ourselves.
Mrs. Wilberforce?
Yes?
I understand you have rooms to let. Some friends and I have formed a musical group. We have been looking for somewhere to practice. Let's get a professional. Mrs. Wilberforce is not a mere appendage to my plan. She's a very core.
How do we know we can trust her to do it right if she don't even know what she's doing?
Mrs. W. should be coming into view just about now. About that.
I wonder if perhaps you'd like some tea?
Tea, coffee, mend the plumbing, give the parrot his medicine.
We've got to get away.
What do you think we should do? Charter a bus?
Most exhilarating.
She saw the money, she'll talk.
Take care of Mrs. W.
How about suicide?
I ain't gonna do it.
You're in this just as much as we are.
Simply try to behave like gentlemen.
It was a good plan, except for the human element.
See that trailer for the restoration. So Mrs. Wilberforce's detached house, you can see an image of it there. It was at 59 Frederica Street, and it was actually built specifically for the film. So quite similar to when we looked at Passport to Pimlico in the first talk, how there was buildings, it's kind of like a location set. So actually creating a fake building, but in a real location. And you can see that Ealing have done that here. So it was actually built specifically for the film, and it cost £2,200 apparently to build. And it was made of lath and plaster, same as the sets on a Passport to Pimlico as well. So it could withstand poor weather conditions, and it was also constructed so parts of it could be easily dismantled for particular tracking shots. And it stood there for 6 weeks in Frederica Street for the location shooting, and the crew stayed nearby. And it's interesting why this particular part of London was chosen, because I think me and Nikki were saying earlier, you wouldn't notice that it's so close to St. Pancras, but it has that kind of, again, that Ealing village sort of feel to it. Historian Sonia Roberts, for instance, described Ealing as geographically close to the heart of London's bustle, yet retaining its village character and close-knit sense of community. And this was a time in 1955 where King's Cross was getting a reputation as being an undesirable area with prostitution, although the streets off the main Caledonian Road and Pentonville Road retained their original characteristics, which appealed, of course, to the filmmakers. Back streets housing mainly working class families, home to factory workers. Very different. It's so gentrified now. And it's again, it's what's partly fascinating of watching Ladykillers now, that this kind of King's Cross that just doesn't exist anymore. So again, there's that sense of it being a sort of historical document in that regard. So Frederica Street was a cul-de-sac off the Caledonian Road, and the street has now also been partly demolished and redeveloped. And there was no through road as well, so therefore the crew were able to clear it quite easily for shooting, which is quite rare to have a no through road in a city, London. You can see there's some lovely shots there. There was a great Guardian article where they looked at the all these lovely publicity, all these shots of the making of the film, which are just great. The local residents had a street party with the cast and crew, and the cast and crew really embedded themselves into the community while they stayed here. They went to the local Greasy Spoon and saw themselves as part of the community, and the community really kind of welcomed them when they were there. People that have actually worked on the film said that the residents were very warm and welcoming and were keen to intermingle. So again, you had that sense of community both on and off camera as well, which is quite nice. Okay, just again, just a quick clip. So I'm aware we're running out of time, just so you can see. Again, there's not many clips online, but just a few here where you can see some location work.
The police, they're at the house. They're actually in the house.
I know.
But where are the others, hmm?
The bogies brought it home for her. What did you expect?
Okay, I will stop that there because I'm conscious of time as well. And of course, using King's Cross with that kind of, that sort of Victorian sort of Gothic look about it really suited the kind of macabre Gothic feel of the film. Alexander McKendrick even described, he saw the film as what he called a horror comic. And that area, London having that kind of King's Cross, having that seedy reputation and that kind of dark side, really fitted in with the kind of, the whole mood and look of the film as well. And then of course this is an Ealing colour film, and McKendrick actually preferred a much kind of muted palette with this film. And as the film aged over time, before the recent BFI restoration, McKendrick actually said that he preferred it when the film had aged because it gave the more macabre, dark look that he actually wanted, that he thought suited the film. Mrs. Wilberforce's house, of course, backs onto the Copenhagen Tunnel at the back of St. Pancras Station, where the gang meet their grisly deaths. And the way that they use the trains and the smoke, it has that kind of expressionism, that kind of noir quality that we've seen in earlier Ealing films as well. And in shooting script of the film, I looked at McKendrick's script, and he put lots of handwritten notes and sketches about how this scene should look. He'd almost storyboarded it out on the script, and how complex, you get a sense of how complex it was to shoot the Copenhagen tunnel scenes. Some scenes were shot on location, some were obviously matched in the studio to ensure the safety of the actors. And at the end of the film, it was originally meant to end with a montage of 5 locations, you know, when they all kind of drop off, to show where the bodies ended up. So there was meant to be one at Crewe Junction, one against the horizon of the sea, one in the Midlands, and one in Scotland, but it's probably too expensive to shoot, so that didn't happen. Okay, right, I will have to stop there because I'm aware that we are out of time. So I think hopefully you can see the kind of continuity even in the later films there, and what all these sorts of Ealing films have in common, and why they're quite fascinating historical documents in some ways. So I hope you enjoyed that, and like I say, if you haven't seen the first talk, you can go and watch that and look at more Ealing London films.
That was fantastic, Jenny. That was really interesting. Hopefully you've got time for a few questions.
Yeah,
just
sure.
to emphasize what Jenny has said, you will be sent out a link both to this recording if you came in late, and also Jenny's last recording where she covered Hue and Cry, Passport Pimlico and The Blue Lamp. Before we go on to the questions, I'll just say that this is one of a series of film talks that we're doing. Some of them are on the Westminster YouTube channel, some of them on the Kensington Chelsea YouTube channel. Next week at the same time, we have Scott Freer, who Jenny knows, who's doing a talk on eco horror films. Some of you may have attended his talk on disaster movies, so you'll know that he really knows his stuff about disaster films of all sorts. And then the week after, on the 22nd of September, we have Simone Adams, who has a podcast called Classic Hollywood. Sorry, I can't actually remember the exact title of the podcast. It's very good though. But she's doing a talk on David Niven, which I'm sure will be really popular. Okay, right, a few questions. Loads of lovely comments, by the way. One thing I was going to ask is, did they ever film in Ealing?
For the films I've looked at, no. Not that I'm aware, aware of.
I mean, I can't think of anything that could have been filmed in Ealing unless it's like
they might have done bits and pieces when they wanted to capture the suburbs or whatever. But for the ones I've looked at, I mean, to be fair, I tended for my thesis, I tended to look at the ones in inner London anyway. I didn't look at films set in the suburbs or anything like that. So I was more interested in how they shot the kind of inner London, to be honest.
Well, I think it's interesting. They don't really do suburbia, do they? I mean, I guess Lavender Hill mob's a bit suburban, but I think that is filmed by Lavender Hill, I think. One thing that did occur to me, as I'm sure it does a lot of anyone who comes from London, is you look at the houses, like what's meant to be Bethnal Green, and whether it's Bethnal Green or whether it's working class Camden, and you just think what they must cost now.
No.
I mean, the house that assuming it still survives, the house that Goody Withers and Edward Chapman live in, you know, that's now £1 million house. It's a 4-bedroom house. Or 3-bedroom house. That is worth a small fortune. Someone, Nicholas Bennett has said that Hue and Cry is filmed partly in Ealing. So
Oh yes, it is. There are bits that were filmed near the studio. Thank you.
Melissa points out, and I'm sure lots of us knew this, that that Goody Withers and John McCallum, of course, married quite soon after this. I think this is the film they met on, isn't it? This is the film they met on, I think.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
I'm not sure. Maybe someone who's look it up on IMDb whether it's the first film, but and they were of course married for 50 years, I think, until John McCallum died. But they had a very long showbiz marriage. Nicholas Bennett's also pointed out that there was a railway strike during the making of while they were making Ladykillers. I don't know whether that made it easier or harder. It might have made it easier, I guess.
I know that they did have to attend, the filmmakers did have to attend an awful lot of meetings to figure out when it would be okay to film and when they could get permissions and what time of day and things like that. So I know that there was a lot of discussion going on around that.
Yeah, Douglas has pointed out that some of Lavender Hill Mob was partly filmed at Gunnersbury Park, South Ealing. Do you guess might be one of the chase sequences, maybe?
Yeah.
Do we know, someone's asked, and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling up and down the questions, so I might miss your name. Do we know where the police station in Lavender, in the Ladykillers is? Someone says it looks like the one in Hackney.
Oh, I did know. I can't think off the top of my head. I'm sure it's in my thesis somewhere. I'm sure I did research that. Could be right, because I know that they did like to shoot, didn't they, at actual police locations and make sure, and they always made sure that the interiors as well that were shot on the studio matched the interiors of the actual police stations themselves, again to give it that sort of authenticity.
Yes, and I guess they had a relationship with the police, didn't they, because of the blue lamps. So yeah. I was also intrigued what you said about the Ladykillers, about how the cast kind of embedded down the location, because that's also a very famous feature of Whiskey Galore.
Yeah.
Well, obviously they were further away, you know, they were stuck on this island for 10 weeks, so they had no choice. But that's also Alexander McKendrick, and that's quite interesting.
Yes.
They did get the locals involved, because presumably there must have been local extras in the market scenes.
Yeah, I think they did get locals involved. Yeah, and I think also it just made everything easier for them, because then it's easier to kind of, you know, if you've got them on side and you're making a load of noise filming or putting off the street or whatever, you know, it does help to have the local people kind of on your side. It makes your life a lot easier.
Yes, and it's certainly essential for Whiskey Galore. Doug's pointing out that the phone box showing the photo of the Ladykillers with the house at the back, and there was a photo, and apparently that photo is very obviously fake if you know what to look for. Right? Yeah. I don't know what to look for. I don't know if it looks different from the phone box we actually saw in the clip.
Yeah, they did obviously have to do a lot of sort of composite work and that, you know, that just to kind of, you know, so it doesn't match the exact sort of continuity as it wouldn't in a fiction film. But yeah, I know that they did do a lot of that kind of work.
Okay. It's not a location question, but someone's asking if do we know if David Hilton's asking, do we know if Earl Cameron changed his natural accent for his various film roles? I mean, my understanding is because he's from Bermuda that sounds quite American, or it sounds quite American to people who are not Americans. So presumably his accent presumably just gradually became more British as he lived here. But I don't know. Do we know if he may have done? Okay. Oh yes, Jess Connolly points out that St. Paul's is so iconic it even turns up in Dead of Night.
Yeah,
I'm guessing in the bus sequence there. So we haven't actually got a vast amount of questions, so please keep them coming. We do have we just have lots of people saying how great you are, so I will send you all these comments afterwards. I mean, I was going to ask, what do you think is the most interesting use of location? Do you have any feelings about which one?
Which film? Which
film has the most of interesting use of location?
My favorite, and the one I think is most interesting probably out of all of them, is probably Hue and Cry, because I think it was the first that used that, you know, immediate moment after the war, and the ways in which they were able to use that for this kind of children's fantasy, and great footage in that film, which, you know, some of you may have heard about in the first talk around Shadwell Basin, and you know, and the way that they use again that kind of disappearing London. But I also think the blue lamp is fantastic as well. I mean, they're all great in different ways. I mean, Pool of London is good for that kind of, you know, where you get those more touristy views of London. Yeah, it's difficult to pick one, but I would probably go for Hue and Cry.
Oh, this one might arouse some controversy. What do you reckon to the Ladykillers remake with Tom Hanks, which I quite like?
I didn't. I couldn't get through it all. I couldn't watch it all. I was just like, no, it's not.
I think you have to accept it's got nothing to do with it. I think
exactly. I think you have to go in with that in mind.
Yeah.
Because I love the original so much, I couldn't quite get past that.
No, I think that's understandable. He does have, as far as I remember, Tom Hanks does have like annoying false teeth, which is obviously a tribute to Alec Guinness.
You don't associate Tom Hanks in that kind of, Alex Guinness is so good, isn't he, at that kind of like quite creepy, macabre, but darkly comic, where Tom Hanks was associated as being a nice guy, don't you? The kind of everything man in films.
Creepy, do you? What Blank asks, do we know if they speeded up the film with car chase sequences?
I don't know, to be honest.
No, maybe someone
looks like they did some time. I'm sure they probably did for safety reasons. I'm sure they did.
Yeah. Can you remember? So someone's pointed out, Gigi Withers and John McCallum were in Love's the Joanna Garden, which is released in 1947. I don't know whether that was before or after. I'm sorry, I can't remember the year of It Always Rains on Sunday. Did you say, I should have looked this up before, I didn't do my research. It Always Rains on Sunday is Arthur LeBurn. So he also wrote the book that Frenzy is based on, didn't he?
Right.
And the book that Frenzy is based on is called Goodbye Piccadilly, Farewell Leicester Square, which kind of suggests, and the film obviously has lots of London scenes of Covent Garden, though the book I think is set in the 40s. It's a 40s book. So he's obviously one of the sort of great forgotten authors of London noir, I suppose.
Yeah. And you got copies of his book in the libraries. They might fly out now, Nikki.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I suspect he's one of the people who's been out of print for a long time.
Yeah.
Someone pointing out that which I don't think I knew this. Nicholas Bennett, Stratford Johns, later in Z Cars and Softly Softly, has a bit part as security guard in the Ladykillers.
Oh, wow.
He gets coshed at the back of King's Cross Station. I didn't know that. I'm going to have to look at that.
Great.
I think even in 1951, he'd be pretty distinctive, wouldn't he?
That's what I like about these talks, is because some of, people, those of you in the audience, you've got all these incredible little facts about the films that really sort of add to our knowledge of it, which is great.
Yeah, Jez Connolly says good luck finding copies of that LeBurn book, and Phil said the Tom Hanks Ladykillers, just know it's the one Tom Hanks film I left angry. Oh well, sorry, apologies for quite liking it.
It's all right, you're allowed to like it.
Okay, well, we've got some absolutely lovely comments, so I will pass these all on to Jenny. You will be sent out a feedback form. Believe me, it is really nice for the we do listen to your comments. If you have suggestions, we do take note of those. It's from suggestions from these feedback forms that we decide that we were able to persuade our bosses to let us use Zoom rather than Teams. So you are listened to, believe me. So it would be great if you could fill out the feedback form. You'll also be sent a link to where you can book for next week's talk and the week after, and there are further talks coming up in all sorts of subjects. We have Ian Christie talking about zoetropes and dioramas, so about very early pre-cinema coming up. So we've got all sorts of things. Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for your questions, and thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.